Welcome everyone to our presentation today. We're so glad to have you with us at What's in Your Toolkit, how Mississippi stakeholders are using CEEDAR Center tools to address special educator shortages. I'm going to start off with introductions. I'm Meg Cameron, co-director with the CEEDAR Center and a faculty member here at the University of Florida. I have with me today Robin Limones, the special education director from the Mississippi Department of Education, and Elisa Goss, Special Education Director from DeSoto County, Mississippi. So I'm going to start off by just giving us an overview of today. We're going to be talking a little bit about the national context for special education teacher shortages. I'm going to give you a little overview of the Special Education Teacher Shortages Toolkit. We're going to set the context for you in Mississippi, talking about the Teaching and Leading Solutions Group, and then walk you through our shortages pilot process. And at the end of today, I'm actually going to pose some questions to you, although you can ask some in the chat pod as well. So let's start off with the national context, and probably the information that I'm going to talk about is not going to surprise you. It's probably information that most of you already know. We know that special education shortages are a national problem. They've been persistent for decades. For the 2020-2021 school year, nearly every state, the District of Columbia, the U.S. territories, reported shortages of special education teachers. The reason for those shortages do range. The research tells us that some of this is low enrollment in teacher preparation programs, poor working conditions, as well as low pay. And what we're unsure about right now is the extent to which COVID impacted those shortages. But what we can tell you anecdotally is that districts and states are reporting even more shortages than we had previously. So it's definitely a concern for us in the field. One of the pieces that's important to know about shortages of special education teachers is that they're very uneven. So while a state may report we have a shortage of special education teachers, that is very different based on local context. It's not uniform at all. And so we really have to look locally to think about the solution for those shortages. And so we're going to talk a little bit about special education teacher shortages today in Mississippi, and specifically some local districts and how we are working to impact those shortages in their local context. So because context is important with special education teacher shortages, and we know that they vary greatly, while we have to think about individual districts, if we do not impact the system, if we don't think about it systemically, then we are not really going to be able to impact those shortages. And so it makes dealing with the challenge really tricky, because we want to go at the individual level, but we also want to think about the system because there are so many pieces. And so in order to do that, we really need to be able to work collaboratively in order to use data and work with multiple stakeholders to be able to impact the shortage problem that we've had persistently. And so that's where we come in, the CEEDAR Center. Hopefully everybody in this presentation already knows about the CEEDAR Center, but if you happen to not know about us, our official name is the Collaboration for Effective Educator Development, Accountability, and Reform Center. We are a national technical assistance center funded by the Office of Special Education Programs. And when we come and work in states, we generally work with state education agencies, so your state Department of Education and institutes of higher education. And then we generally bring in local districts as we need them and as we are working towards specific projects in different states. Our mission is to support students with disabilities by building the capacity of state personnel preparation systems to really make sure that we have effective teachers and leaders that are implementing evidence-based practices and high leverage practices within multi-tiered systems of support. So you heard me just talking about students with disabilities, and you may think, oh, CEEDAR's a special education effort, but that would be wrong, because we know that in order to impact outcomes for students with disabilities, we have to be working across our teachers and leaders, because students with disabilities are in every classroom. And so we need to be working with general educators, special educators, and leaders if we really want to be thinking about the whole system. So as we're working in states, we're really much broader than just thinking about special education. Our winning aspiration, if we're winning, then every student with a disability has an equitable opportunity to achieve. And that is really what we are working towards. So do you want to put out there our website? If you haven't been to our website, CEEDAR.org, there is just a plethora of resources. You can learn about our high leverage practices, which is a collaboration with the Council for Exceptional Children. We have innovation configurations, course enhancement modules, PD packs, which are helpful to faculty and practitioners in professional development. Resources, we have policy and practices brief, and the one that you see here on the bottom in black, the shortages toolkit, is the one that we're going to be focused on today. The shortages toolkit is really a collaborative effort that we worked on with the Center for Great Teachers and Leaders, and really it's organized around the guiding principle that short-term strategies are necessary. So I don't have a teacher in my classroom. I need a solution for not having a teacher who's in front of that classroom. But those have to be paired with long-term systemic strategies to attract, prepare, and retain effective special education teachers, or we will not be able to solve these shortage challenges. So the toolkit is designed to help state teams through a collaborative process that helps to be comprehensive by looking at data. It allows us to look at data and to think about the entire career continuum, from attracting to preparing to retaining teachers, so that all students with disabilities can have an effective teacher and have access to an effective teacher. So the approach to the toolkit is it starts by gathering data, and then we use this data to really develop some initial plans and steps. And then as we implement our plan, we also collect data to help to inform and improve our process, and then also to help to inform sustainability and scale up. And so I am actually going to pass the floor over to Robin now, and she is going to tell you about initially the team that is set up to start this, and then we'll go into how we use the toolkit in our process in Mississippi and where we are now. So passing it over to you, Robin.
Thank you, Meg. The first thing I think you should know is that Mississippi has been a CEEDAR partner since 2015. And right away, as soon as they partnered with us, they rebranded themselves as the Teaching, Leading, and Solutions Group. We did this intentionally to set up a structure for this group to continue even after the CEEDAR grant and funding was gone. And as I mentioned before, the Mississippi CEEDAR partners are the Mississippi Department of Education, the University of Mississippi, William Carey University, Delta State University, and 6 local school districts. We also recently added to our Mississippi partnership Tougaloo College and the University of Southern Mississippi. So the first thing we did is we looked at the strands that we needed. We have 3 committees working on policy changes and ensuring effective educator preparation and practice, and on recruitment and retention of effective teachers and leaders. The work we're going to talk about today is going to fall within the recruit, retain team. So if you look at the infographic that's in the chat pod that Meg's putting in the chat pod, it provides a synopsis of the pilot project that we have been focused on. We thought it was important to create a graphic for communication purposes. This would ensure that everyone could effectively understand and communicate the process. So the first thing we did is to develop a collaborative team consisting of various stakeholders. Our team includes the CEEDAR Center, the Mississippi Department of Education, and within the agency, we included multiple partners such as CTE, which is our curriculum and technical team. We included elementary and secondary education, early childhood, school improvement. We wanted to make sure that everybody within the agency was a partner in this process. We also included our local educator preparation programs, and we have 6 local school districts that we included. These are our 6 school districts that partnered with the department and CEEDAR as part of this project. As you can see from the map, the districts come from a variety of locations across the state. We wanted to make sure that we were choosing from largest to smallest. We wanted to make sure there was diversity, and we looked at the poverty, the populations, as we were making the decisions about who would be included in this partnership. So it was important for us to collect some state data to ensure that we were accessing what was critical to address the teacher shortage. So we started by collecting some data on the statewide shortage of special education teachers. You can see on our first infographic, Mississippi has a lot of students with disabilities enrolled in public schools, but does not prepare enough educators to fill teacher vacancies to support the education of these students. In the 2019-2020 school year, Mississippi had about 221 special educator vacancies, but only prepared 65 special educators. So Meg is going to put that infographic into the chat pod that we've updated. Our next step was to collect district data. We collected basic district demographic data. And then, as you can see from the slide, the shortages toolkit helped us to narrow down what data we needed to collect.
All right, so this graphic shows the student populations in the district, and you can see that we've got several districts that are smaller with just over 1,800 students in their district. Then we've got some districts that have between 2,300 and 4,000 students, and then our district, DeSoto County, which is the largest district in the state, has approaching 35,000 students. This graphic just shows the proportion of students that are limited English proficiency and disability status. You can see that our district, DeSoto, is highlighted in red. And then we also looked at poverty levels, since that can median household income, so that can impact what the student population and also the teacher population looks like in a district. You can see that this is per thousands or given in thousands. So some areas have poverty of almost 50%, but our district is around 10%. And then you can see median households in many of the districts are much below what the median household income in DeSoto is. So then we collected demographic. After we got the demographic data, we looked at kind of understanding the shortages statewide. So each special ed director collected specific data that was specific to their context in their district. And we used the data collection tool within the shortages toolkit and developed a document to obtain our data. And here are the questions that were asked. So many districts did not collect all the data. In fact, most districts didn't collect most of the data. My district's a good example. We just had not kept that type of data going back in previous years. However, you know, as we were looking forward in the next years, we were able to capture that data as our human resources department was processing which teachers left, which teachers were hired, how we moved teachers around to fill positions. Last year we had 36 special ed teachers leave, and I had 51 vacancies to fill in adding some positions in our district. We had 74 applicants that had special education certification, but you can see we still don't know out of all of our schools how many were interviewed, how many people were offered a position, and how many were hired out of those 74 applicants. And this process is going to help us build capacity in collecting shortages data. So we hope to be able to collect more data statewide as we scale up. Then using this data and the anecdotal data, we were able to identify some very important findings. We found out, of course, as many of us know, the supply does not meet the demand. The preparation programs, we just have not developed those strong partnerships that are needed. There's challenging school culture in some of our districts, and more principal support and understanding of the job of a special education teacher is needed. Overall, teachers tend to stay that first year, but by year 3, they tend to leave districts. And we also have some pretty inconsistent data to kind of help us guide in where we need to work. So using the gap data, we started brainstorming ideas in educator preparation, recruitment, selection and hiring, induction and mentoring, and compensation and incentives. And these were all identified in the shortages toolkit. And through this process, we had brainstormed about 80 different ideas of how to address the shortages. The challenge next was to narrow down the list. With 80 ideas, we needed to come up with a focus for this first year of the pilot. We used Padlet as a team and worked collaboratively and to rate strategies and determine the feasibility of and likelihood of making an impact in the year 1 of our pilot, and coming up with a consensus of where to go. So you can see the Padlet, and we took all the strategies and rated and provided comments. This allowed us to kind of talk through every idea and have varying perspectives on what might be the best focus. Then we collapsed all the notes, comments, and ratings into one document and highlighted the top rated in each of the 4 original bucket areas. Our next steps in this group was to go through this document and pull out a couple of strategies, preferably something that was short-term and then something that was more of a long-term goal. And then the team wanted to begin to implement what we wanted to implement to address the strategies. So while we only picked mentoring and induction for this first year, we can come back to this list as a team and look at things in these 6 districts that we want to address moving forward.
Thanks, Elisa. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about where we are now, because we are at the process. You know, we've already collected our statewide data, we collected our district data, we identified our gaps, we came up with ideas, and now we're at implementation of our pilot. And while we picked one focus area, it's kind of a big area. We picked induction and mentoring, you know, primarily targeting on that losing teachers problem, which seemed to be consistent across all of our districts. And here's where we landed. We are going to have a mentor training that includes monthly check-ins. We're going to have a consideration for a certificate that may go along with that mentor training. We are going to have ongoing professional development for our administrators on inclusive leadership, ongoing mentoring for first-year special education teachers, monthly professional development for our first-year special education teachers that are focused on high leverage practices, a professional learning community for our second and third year special educators that will include general education collaborators, and of course, the collection of data, which will help us to inform our process as we're going along. So here's where we are currently. We already started collecting exit survey data. So that was something that we hadn't done in our districts in the past. So all of our districts asked the teachers who left this last year to do an exit survey. And then we also asked the matching administrators to fill their to fill out an exit data survey on their teachers as well. And not surprisingly, I just looked at this data at the end of last week. It matches kind of what we know nationally. The majority of the teachers were citing school culture problems, lack of administrative support, and the other one noted in the top 3 was unclear roles and responsibilities. So again, that data, when we get back together as a group, we'll break that down and it'll help to inform some of the work that we're doing this year. We do have mentor training set up this month in July. We have 2 days for the mentor training. And so we'll have 2 days in the north and 2 days in the south. And that's really to help with travel for our districts because they're all over the place. We provided some mentor selection guidance for our special ed directors and administrators and brought in some communication with superintendents so we could really kind of help with the loop and make sure everybody was knowledgeable. We already made one adjustment to our previous slide for our plan, which is instead of just having our first year teachers get a mentor, we're going to have our first and second year teachers, because last year was COVID and it was weird and strange and challenging. We really wanted to provide the teachers who were first year last year with that same experience. So we're going to do first and second year teachers who are going to get mentoring, and then the third year teachers will do the professional learning community with the general education collaborators. It's clear we need administrative professional development, and so that's going to kick off in July as well. It's going to be 1 day in the north and 1 day in the south, and then that'll have follow-up sessions, and we're currently also working on the orientation that beginning teachers will come to. Now, one thing that's also important is as we're doing this work, we're thinking very carefully about scale up and sustainability. And so, for example, for the mentor training, we want to be able to eventually provide that statewide. And so we invited RESAs, a representative from each one of the RESAs to attend the mentor training with the idea that long-term, RESAs would be able to pick up the mentor training and provide those to the districts within their region long-term. So we really want to be thinking about that scale up and sustainability and how that will work long-term. So as we go through the process, we'll know more. We'll be collecting data, and that will really help us to make changes and adjustments, of course, as we're moving forward. So that's pretty much the overview of our process, but I know we have some time in the chat pod and to kind of discuss what's going on in your context. And we've included all of the items that we've talked about today. So the infographic is included, our statewide infographic, our process, and 2 of the statewide infographics are also included, as well as the link to the shortages toolkit. So the question really for you all, as you're thinking about your own local context, is what data from your context is available to inform special education teacher shortages, from what vantage point, and what partnerships exist that can be leveraged in your context to impact shortages. So you heard, I think it was Robin earlier, talk about one of the areas of need that we identified was the fact that we don't have a lot of strong partnerships. Actually, that was Lisa. Strong partnerships between our universities and our districts. So while we're going to be thinking about how we can strengthen those partnerships, that can help us to leverage our shortages as we're moving on. But what's going on in your location that can be leveraged? And then how can you at your agency, whether you're at a state department or you're at a district or you're at a university or an organization, how can you be a part of working through the shortages toolkit to inform your special education teacher shortages? We've been at this now for a long time, and it doesn't seem to change. There always seems to be shortages. And so we really have to come at this instead of working individually. We really have to come at it together and as a system if we want to make changes. And so my charge to you in closing out our presentation today is to really think about how you can be a part of a larger collaborative team to really impact those shortages in your areas, because that's how we're really going to be able to make a difference. If you have any questions about our presentation today, or you would like to follow up on what's going on with the CEEDAR Center or in Mississippi, or the work that's going on in the districts, we encourage you to reach out. Here is our information for you. We would be happy to answer any of your questions, and we really appreciate you being with us today. So thank you so much. And if you have questions, we're in the chat pod. We are happy to answer them as well. So thanks, everyone.